to get in here, and then we'll kick off. Hope everyone's having a good morning.
Okay. Hey, Hefe. How are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
Great. Pretty good. Pretty good.
We have a lot of great discussion planned for today.
How's your day going?
Well, it's my
Yes,
morning.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's my morning right now. It's 6 a.m. on a Sunday for me. But it's good. I enjoy being here, and I enjoy doing these meetings. So yeah, not a problem for me. And I usually take a nap later in the day to make up for it. So it's all good.
Yeah. Got to get that key nap in.
Yeah, exactly. The midday siesta. Okay. Yeah, I guess we could start off here. I'll start off with our proposal review. We got quite a few proposals here that recent SIG props and core props that have passed or are going to pass. So let's start with the 2023 DTF budget request. That one has met quorum. It did pass successfully, 11 million over 9 million and 98% in favor of. So we're just waiting on a core prop for that. I guess maybe that's something we can discuss a little bit later today, is just a process for submitting the core props, or I think there was even some discussion about the DAO potentially handling that, but we'll get to that maybe at some point during the meeting here. So yeah, that one just needs a core prop. No changes needed for that. The Forge raffle strategy and the revenue split, and then the Forge V1.1, the Geode release, and the Gotchi Lodge 2023 are all ending today. I believe you have, let's have a look here. You have 8 hours on the Geodes, 7 hours on the raffle revenue splits, and 4 hours on the Gotchi Lodge. So get your votes in there if you have not already. These are SIG props. So you can go ahead and do that. Let's see what they're looking like here. Gotchi Lodge, 14 million over 9 million, meeting quorum, 82% in favor of. Forge V1.1 Geode release, 14 million over 9 million, meaning quorum, and it looks like 94% in favor of. Forge raffle strategy and revenue splits. This one had a few different options. It looks like option one, which was, let's have a look at what option one was. Right here. Option one, accept revenue split, and then option two plus accept revenue split. Let's see. Option one was legendary schematics via all geodes and accept revenue splits. Option two is legendary schematics in geodes and raffles and accept revenue splits. And then neither option delay release. So let's see what it looks like here. Looks like option one has 12 million votes, 82% in favor of. So there you go. Then we got some core props here that were recently put out this week. We got Agate 57, established the core framework guiding wearable release. And this was put together, I think Mikey J came up and spoke on this a couple weeks ago. 8.7 million votes in favor of, 94%, 9.2 over 9 million quorum. Agate 58, launch round 2 parcel VRF rerolls. And it looks like, ooh, this one was kind of close. 9.8 over 9 million, so it did meet quorum. And it looks like the prevailing vote is no, wait. Yeah, 59% in favor of waiting. Interesting. And then 40% in favor of launching a reroll. So that's interesting. I see there's a note here. Hardcore's put here. Possibly front run by Gotchi Guardians, maybe. No, that's good. So yeah, that's how that one went. I guess no action needed for that. We got a core prop that is, or a SIG prop that is going live during the meeting here. I see it looks like it's pending. And this one is, oh, hang on, guys. I don't know if I'm sharing my screen here. 1 second. Yeah, let me do that here real quick. Okay. Yeah. So where was I? The Infinity Keys Aavegotchi partnership with updated numbers. That core prop will be going, or SIG prop will be going live in 54 minutes. And this is a proposal put out there by Infinity Keys, looking for some. They're looking for funding their the Infinity Keys starter pack for Aavegotchi. So all the details in there. I think we did discuss Infinity Keys last week, and you can have a look at that. They have all the details in that in the proposal there. All right, let's see here. Let's review our outcomes. And so Forge Core Prop this week, Infinity Key SIG Prop this week. That's coming. That's going live here pretty soon. I finished the mission and vision board from a couple weeks ago, just listening back to those conversations, reading the chats, trying to aggregate all the opinions I could find that were relevant to the discussion. And I think Hardcore helped me get this beautiful mission and vision board together. So we'll be going through that later today. You put there, DAO is unfunded and leaderless. Well, actually, we're going to have a big conversation around that today, and that's something I'm actually looking forward to. So let's see who we have in the house here. I think we might have Dr. Wagme joining us. We might have some other, we got Mikey J in the house. Yeah, we'll be talking about the DAO development team proposal that we have kind of put together here. I've been helping Dr. Wagme out with that. And there's some other members of the Aavegotchi community you might recognize who have also put together their proposals. So I would like to maybe start the discussion off with that. If Dr. Wagme is available, if you are not, I can skip over to the next topic there, and we can circle back around. See, he has his hand up there.
Hey, good morning.
GM.
So we want to just dive right into it, talk about the unfortunate acronym of the DDT that maybe needs to be updated to DDF, but talk about that and go from there.
Yeah. And I see Hardcore has done a good job.
DAO Revolution.
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
Can we go? Well, I mean, we've been talking for like really months now about what it looks like to be a little bit more effective as a DAO, what it looks like to have some structure, and the potential advantages of that and the disadvantages of not having anything in place. We tried with the DTF to have some, process where we could engage community members, help them build, fund them, help grow our community. And the protocol, I think that's a lot of what we're hoping to do with Aavegotchi. But it's pretty challenging to run, especially from an uncompensated standpoint. There's lots of different people applying lots of things like to review, like to have any like good measures for that is really hard. And so that really kicked off this discussion on like what it looks like to kind of have some structure and oversight from that perspective. And then, from the Forge perspective, we're working on developing the protocol, trying to add value, trying to add revenue to make all of the work that we're doing sustainable. And from Pixelcraft's roadmap yesterday, the 2023 goal is to transition fully from Cocoon to Oasis phase in 2023, which is a really pretty enormous task, one that I think even if we put a lot of resources at, it's going to be a ton of work and difficult to like fully accomplish. And I think probably being a good DAO is going to be like a lifelong endeavor, right, on how we do well and do this right. So trying to get something a little bit more granular in front of the community was my goal with this like initial like discussion kickoff, because we've been talking about something. We need something kind of with specifics in it, how things would actually work. So we could talk about, this is a good idea, that's a bad idea. Like we don't need those, we do. And so the whole goal of this is to get a lot of feedback. And if you look at like my initial Forge post, like the Forge is completely different on like what it's actually going to be than what I proposed initially. And I think I'm hoping for the same grace in looking at this proposal, that we can iterate together, talk about what we need, what our priorities are as a DAO, and if we even want some sort of leadership team or development force to help our DAO transition. And so with that intro, so the DAO development team or DAO development force would be a group with a varied skill set that could take on like multiple different roles in the DAO, and would like number one priority is to like really understand what the priorities are of the DAO. We talked about having a DAO roadmap, understanding like what those things that we put on a roadmap, like how feasible are they, like what does it take to execute those, and then perhaps if we wanted the people in those roles that help establish what the goals are, could execute some of them, and or establish what work needs to be done. So we could post those up for bounties, leverage some project management stuff with D-work that's incoming, so we can get as much work in front of the community as possible to like really have our ethos of a community built project possible. So that's what this group would be doing, is being able to do some of the work, understand what needs to be done, post it, and then with like Mikey J's proposed role, like really helping with operations. We have a ton of opportunity to have better operational processes throughout basically every aspect of our DAO, with trying to understand how we're funding projects, like that process, getting funded, the measures for it, how our DAO voting works. Like basically from top to bottom, there's opportunity, and Mikey is an incredible asset to our DAO and willing to take on getting like that set up. I can just keep talking. Any questions so far, Hefe, or things you think I should clarify?
No, I mean, I'm just right now, I'm looking at, Metamorphosis. I'm looking at Oasis, kind of what is coming down what is coming down the pipeline for us, that we don't really have a roadmap per se to get there. But I totally agree with having like a team or some sort of leadership in the DAO, a collective leadership that can actually, guide the DAO, get certain things in place, certain processes established, and, even like enable some really cool projects built on top of the protocol. I think the Forge was one of the first examples, but certainly not the last. So I think to have this sort of leadership would be highly beneficial. I think there are some concerns that the community will raise, but we're completely open to feedback on this. Like this is a collaborative process with the community to find something that works not only for the DAO, but something the community is satisfied with. And so, no, I mean, I don't really have anything specifically to interject on at this moment.
Well, and then, so I think one of the key sticking points here is kind of understanding, like, okay, this is like the Forge team, like plus Hefe, right? And so, like, why is it set up like this? So, I guess our initial thought was we have loved building the Forge. We're like really close. We should be deploying the testnet like really soon. I think the value we've added from the Forge team is like really huge. There was a lot of really big problems and structural problems that we had like with our economics that the Forge is going to help with. And so we have this team that wants to keep building. We're really excited about other things that we can do from the Forge to both drive revenue, to drive protocol engagement, and to just like help continue develop. So I wanted to capture, we have this team that wants to work for the DAO, that wants to keep doing things. Like, can we have them take on some extra work to help with these other operational opportunities that we have to help provide like a group of people that can like basically help our DAO. But I think we're getting like some fair feedback from the community on like why is it this Forge team in this role? Can we separate those out? Should we just like keep the Forge team and Forge protocol developments separate? And then we could have, if we wanted, a development team that is separate, helps set the priorities, and works on some of the other operational opportunities too. And I think that's where we're getting a lot of good feedback in chat. That's hard to both talk and keep up on, but we're hopeful for feedback on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just reading some of the comments here. There was that document. There's some extensive documents you posted in the DAO forum there for anybody who does want to kind of get the finer details. But I guess we could go through like the specific positions and kind of what is the vision for, the general vision for what each position is going to set out to do. I think would be good to go through.
Sure. Yeah. So as far as the different roles, so my role, proposed role, and I guess one more preface, right? So these are people that are like willing to take on a role, and it's a little bit different than say like having a passion project where you're developing a game and you get a little bit down the road and then you want DAO funding for, because like these are like people and like their lives and like that have like real jobs and real obligations outside. So I think proposing something in people for a role without knowing like if they'll actually do it wasn't something I wanted to do. I don't want to put a proposal in front of the DAO or a discussion with like no one that's actually willing to fit these roles. So I worked really hard with Mikey, Oliver, Diddley, and Hefe to understand like what time commitment are you willing to put in, like what deliverables are you hoping to deliver over a period of time, and for this pay, would you do this for this time commitment? And so that's why these positions come with a potential person, because I didn't want to put like these like made up roles and like hopeful expectations without having someone that could possibly fit in them. But I do think it's very reasonable feedback to say, if we do we want these roles? And if we do, let's open them up to the community to apply, because yes, that sounds like a good idea, but no, we shouldn't just assume this person should do it. And I think that's really reasonable feedback that we've gotten from Bearded and Mark and others too. So my role would be similar to like what I do on the Forge, and then plus what I do just in general for the community from a DAO perspective already. So understanding like the DAO, like how DAO governance works, how if we have a project, how do we get like what we're doing in front of the DAO to like make sure that we're getting feedback from the community. I hope that people think that Forge has gone okay and that they understand what's been going on and have been involved in the process, or the DAO has been involved. And that takes a lot of work, right? A lot of intentionality to say, this is exactly what we're doing. Let's make sure the DAO agrees with it. These are the key decision points that we have to make that should go in front of the DAO, because we shouldn't make them ourselves. And so having someone to understand we have to have the DAO driving the decisions that we make is really important, but then also be able to provide accountability to the team to understand like what they need to get their project done, to like provide some vision on like what should be the next thing that we want to do as the Forge team. Like that has been a lot of work, and it's about 20 to 30 hours per week since October, since we came up with the Forge idea, and is like time that I'm willing to like keep spending, but I just can't do that without like some level of compensation moving forward. And that's why I left the DTF, and I'm hoping that this could combine like the opportunities that and the goodwill that we built from the Forge team to do that. So that's the one role. Mikey Is Mikey in the audience?
Let's see if we can get Mikey up here also. I think I do see him in the audience. Yeah, well, let's get him up.
Yeah. I'll let Mikey talk a little bit about his role and how he'd be so key in operations and like making things work, and kind of getting his take on this entire proposal is super important because he's so well spoken. So go for it, Mikey.
GM. Yeah, let me
GM.
know. I'm in a car and might not have great service, so if you guys like can't hear me, just yeah. So the way I think about this, and I kind of said this a little earlier, is that we're talking about like looking at this roadmap, and we're talking about the DAO getting to a place where it can handle the responsibilities of the coming phases, metamorphosis and oasis, and it's great to kind of think about the situation where we can all kind of chip in and do this via bounties here and there and without a lot of structure. But I think it's clear, I think, to a lot of us in the community that we're going to need to organize in some fashion in order to kind of have the same kind of processes, business processes and practices in place that, like, for example, Pixacraft would have, because a lot of the work that the DAO, in terms of oversight of the contracts, in terms of innovating on the code, in terms of everything the DAO needs to do, is essentially work that is being done by Pixelcraft today in some way, shape, or form, a lot of it. And so I really do think it makes sense for the DAO to think about just that next step in its evolution. And at least in terms of the way that I think about it in terms of finance and operations is, there's so much that we don't know how to do. There's so many processes that simply just do not exist right now. And, we're going to need to start to sit down and take a look at those. And what I would love to do is find a way that we can have a feedback mechanism, whereas we can have a team of people who are focused on executing what the DAO wants to be working on in terms of moving forward. That doesn't mean developing every little thing that's going on, but it might mean helping to administer grants to make sure that work that is commissioned in grants is being done properly, is up to spec, that the code's being reviewed, so that there are people whose job it is, like, day in and day out, to kind of look after the business of the DAO to make sure that that projects are moving forward. Right now, we have so many things that are kind of stuck in the mud. We've been trying to do mission and vision. There's talk about implementing D work. There's talk about what to do about the bonding curve. But unless someone takes the initiative to kind of step up and say, hey, I'm going to work on this and put in the time it takes to put together a thoughtful proposal to do it and get funding to work on it, it's just not going to get done. And this is where I think having staff members of the DAO whose job it is to kind of keep these things moving forward. It doesn't mean they do everything in the DAO, and it certainly doesn't mean that they govern the DAO in any way. What it means is that you've got people who are being held accountable for moving the ball forward. And for me, that's about creating accountability. The great thing with hiring Hefe in the project manager role last year was a big step forward, because now there was someone who could be held accountable to be running the DAO meetings. There was someone who'd be held accountable for putting the Miro boards together, and Hardcore does that too, of course, and everything. But to me, that's what it's all about. I would like to know, as a DAO member, I would like to know that there are people who are accountable for doing these things. Not that the ball's just sitting there waiting for someone to come pick it up, but that it's somebody's responsibility to be doing these things. We don't have financial reports in the DAO. I mean, of course, everything's on chain, but we don't have like a cohesive set. We don't have like an easy way to know what are the DAO's cash flows. What are the DAO? We could see, what assets it has, so we have kind of a balance sheet. We don't know how much money the DAO is coming in and from what sources. These are things that I just feel like any organization needs in order to make good decisions, in order for the DAO voters to make good decisions. So my vision for a finance and ops role is to kind of help, gather feedback from the DAO on what we could do better, what are our most important processes as a business, as an organization, and how do we make those better? You know, how does the DAO think they could be better? What's working, what's not? And then when we find what is working, talk about a new process, document it so that there's posterity, so that if, you know, when someone else comes into that role, or when someone else's turn to do something, you know, there's a history in place. You know, these are the things that any organization needs to have in order to be successful and run smoothly. Just, you know, basic financial reporting and well-documented business processes, and you know, just the ability to operate in a mature way and to be able to handle that responsibility, because you're going to need accountability, you know, if we're going to move on to these phases. So for me, that's what it's all about. I think a lot of the comments and early feedback, I think, are actually really great points. I think the feedback, Bearded's feedback about, you know, kind of it feeling like there's kind of two things being shoved together here, the idea of development of the Forge, and also the idea of kind of, you know, development of the DAO's processes itself. I think that's very fair. I think there's certainly ways we could, you know, think about why and how those things should be distinct. I also think, you know, the feedback about having kind of, you know, how do we kind of elect a cohesive team, but also, you know, make sure that there's opportunity for anybody to kind of, for these positions to be open to anybody, and, you know, how do we manage that process? I think that's all fair, and I think I just look forward to seeing how the conversation goes and hearing more feedback and, you know, contributing in any way I can.
I think one of the concerns, you know, either directly or indirectly that I've seen brought up is to have a leadership structure in place like this that maybe priorities the DAO might want to have executed, or specific ideas that the DAO, you know, really, you know, we've had really good ideas come up to the top from regular members contributing to the DAO. And I feel like the community overall appreciates this. You know, I think it's what makes DAOs special, is that someone can come here without any pre-vetted qualifications and deliver value and create value and be recognized for that by the DAO, and even maybe get funding if it's a really good idea. And so this path is something that, you know, we've kind of embraced this since my tenure as a project manager. That's something that we've kind of embraced, is funding good community ideas. And so I think there's some concern about losing that. You know, we see this in top-down corporate structures where there's a good idea that comes up from the bottom that, you know, the general population there working for the company, they agree that this is a good idea, but for some reason the idea somehow gets ignored by you know, key members at the top, and then maybe some other idea comes trickling down that maybe was not optimal. And so that is something we can address as a DAO, and the fact that we have kind of matured as a DAO, it works to our favor. You know, having something like you know, community task forces, you know, specific task forces built around getting, you know, tasks done. I think task forces could work really well under this sort of leadership, and or even, you know, like working groups that could get funded by the DAO. Overall, I think having something like this would actually create more opportunity for community contributors in the DAO, because there would be a better sense of direction. There would be a voted on set of priorities, and I think overall we would have more clarity with what needs to be done next. And in the process, you know, there will still be good ideas that get brought up. And as a community lead, my kind of goal here is to make sure those ideas are still being recognized, to still make sure that the community is being represented overall in terms of feedback or specific things that they may or may not like. I think that sort of representation is important. And the fact that these members, I mean, the visions that were put together for each of these roles was put together from the perspective of these members, but that's not to say someone else in the DAO who has experience with these things is able to actually contribute to this. This is a working model. And so we're very much open to, you know, if you have some sort of experience in some of these fields and you have something to contribute in terms of, you know, I think this would be better for the model, or, you know, I think maybe your deliverables could use this instead, or any sort of feedback from your relevant experiences is welcome here. And so just wanted to make sure that people know that. I was kind of reading the comments earlier about, I think Choina had asked if this is a structure that is seen in other DAOs, like a leadership team, or do other DAOs have leadership teams? And the short answer is yes. And I didn't know this, but Coder Dan said Maker DAO actually pays a really significant amount to their team. I think Sushi has a team like that as well. I don't think it's abnormal to have leadership in a DAO. I don't think you're centralizing the DAO, but I think the tenets of decentralization still have to be respected. Community opinions still need to be respected. These meetings are very key to a lot of that stuff. So yeah, I think this structure is going to be beneficial to the DAO, and maybe, I'm going to put this out there. Disagree with me if you think maybe, but it looks to me that this sort of structure, to have this team put together, the ideal end goal would be get to a place where maybe we don't need to have all these positions in this capacity. But at the moment, it seems like this sort of thing would deliver a lot of value for the DAO and get us to a place where we're actually more functional as a DAO. We're able to execute on things quickly. We have processes in place, for either, on the project side or even on the DAO development side. So I do see the benefit in that, and kind of curious to know, like, from you guys, Dr. Wagme and Mikey J, do you see these positions being like permanent, or do you see this being as like we need to execute on a specific list of priorities? It's going to be a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting, but hopefully we can get the DAO to a point where maybe we don't need five full-time, like in this capacity, positions. I guess, what's the kind of long-term outlook with this, is kind of what I'm trying to get at, I guess, with this sort of a plan.
Yeah, I think Mike and I have similar ideas as far as, if we optimize our operations, right, if we can like set up really good dashboards, operational processes, understand how our voting works, help in the transition to on-chain voting, like have a healthy system set up. Like, I think our goal and vision, probably all of us in the community, is like to be able to phase out some of these, right? Yeah. As we have a really mature system, but like we like don't have that system in place. Like, we need to build a system that like works, that's really effective and efficient, and we really need to get as many members from our community building as possible. So I was scrolling through like my DMs over the last 2 months. So I had 18 different people reach out asking to be a part of the Forge team and to build. And so we have all these people that like want to build, that want to contribute, but we don't have a structure in place to say like, this is what the DAO wants to build. This is the work that it needs to like take to do it. So these are the bounties, and then like posting those, making sure the person's qualified, measuring them to make sure they deliver it, and then paying them. So we have all this potential work in our DAO, and then we don't have a way to translate, like, first get like what the DAO priorities are, but then like get the people to do the work. And it's going to take a huge investment of time and energy and like expertise to bridge that gap. And I think I definitely can't do that myself, right? I think while the DTF was like a nice like pilot, I think like we really failed to be super effective and get like adequate people building. If we had that much energy still out there to build and contribute, that ended up like not being used. So that's the goal, is to get as much work in front of the community as possible so we can all build and grow the protocol in the community together. And I think we need some structure to bridge the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And PG actually makes a really good point there. Gotchi Farming had dropped some of their insights into this plan in the thread, I believe the DAO forum thread, and it kind of mentioned like the inclusion of guilds, and I totally agree. Guilds are going to represent the community at large. It's I keep saying guilds are sort of the small business of the metaverse, and we're starting to see that with Aavegotchi guilds. rolling out their own kind of questing programs or reward programs, hosting events, doing live streams regularly, and just being good like ambassadors for Aavegotchi. And so guilds would definitely be a key part of the the feedback that we want to get. There are opportunities for this group to build out something like a DAO council with all the guilds and organizations, key organizations in Aavegotchi. I mean, that would be a great way to get some feedback from the community. But there are things like that. I mean, it's not really part of this plan, but in a general sense, to have the guilds organizations represented as part of this plan is definitely, in my mind at least, definitely something we want to implement.
Yeah, and I would actually just point to the hardcore. Or actually, no, it's on the Miro board. Hardcore posted earlier. A lot of the detail in Dr. Wagney's kind of post here was actually in those documents about the different positions and the deliverables in those documents. So I see like a lot of people are saying, oh, like we're going to spend all this money and all we're going to get is a roadmap, or oh, we're going to spend all this money and all we're going to get is X. But really, there's a combination of things here. And it's fair to think that, hey, maybe some of those things we don't need, and let's talk about that. Or maybe some of those things should be a separate thing, if it's the next iteration of the Forge or whatever. That all makes sense to talk about. But I think we really have to look at the whole chunk of those things. We have to look at the whole picture. It's not just creating a roadmap. In terms of like, I really can't impress enough, and anyone who has had the experience of either working in an operations position or has run their own business understands how important it is for any organization to have like consistent set of processes for having feedback loops, right? We have to have a way for the DAO to be able to provide feedback on things that we can synthesize into actual proposals that can be written and then voted on. And I think that's kind of one of the real missing pieces that Dr. Wagney highlighted. The mission, vision, values discussion is kind of a perfect example, and it happens in a lot of discussions. We have a lot of kind of ideas, but at some point it takes someone's work to synthesize all the feedback and turn that into something that can be voted on and something that has all the details fleshed out. And that work is oftentimes just being done on a volunteer basis right now, or someone's getting funded after the fact. And so because of that, a lot of that work just isn't. So, I would really, direct people to those documents and to the Miro board, to the deliverables that Hardcore put on there, because that's kind of the package, that the team envisions working on over the course of, the next 6 months.
Yeah, well said. I'm just going to quickly check the comments here to see what people are saying. Yeah, I think there's some comments there about transparency. And so just so you guys know, the Aavegotchi DWork is already integrated into our server, and it is ready to kind of be used. But I thought maybe we should have this conversation here first and kind of figure out the direction we're going before we, flip the on switch. Everybody with the Gotchi Gang role should have access to it. But this is a conversation we need to have to kind of figure out which way the DAO is going. This ties in. This kind of does tie in with our mission and vision. Like, what are we trying to accomplish as a DAO? What is our vision? Metamorphosis kind of outlines that we're going to be getting some great responsibility here given to us in the next short little while here. Can execute smart contract calls, can upgrade certain mechanics in Aavegotchi, ghost governance. So like some of these things are pretty big. Like, you would want a team to manage some of these things, in my opinion, or at least to have some responsible members appointed by the DAO to oversee some of these very large responsibilities. And so, that's kind of my take on it. Let's see.
If we can, Dan, you guys just posted the roadmap yesterday. I'm curious on what your thoughts are. What is the DAO's involvement in going from Metamorphosis to Oasis? I know that kind of from a legal security perspective, we're trying to officially be Oasis, so it's good to have documented that that's the goal. But what do you view as the DAO's responsibility in that transition? And do you think right now, with current state, we have the structure to reasonably do that in 2023?
Well, that's a great question. I think from our perspective, Pixelcraft, obviously we would love it if the DAO had more of the development work that pertains to the DAO under their belt and able to kind of execute on that. So for example, like when someone wants to make a change to the contract, right now, generally Pixelcraft is writing those changes, testing them, doing all the deployment and everything. So that needs to change at some point if we're going to be able to get to Metamorphosis Oasis. And so that's a big part of this whole decentralization process is making sure that there's a process with the community set up, that there's people that write the code, there's people that write specs for the code, there's people that write tests for the code, and it could be the same person or one or two people, but those would be, and we can continue, the DAO can continue hiring Pixelcraft to do that we currently have this, but we just think it would be better if the DAO also has some internal members that are able to handle that. So like one example, Aave DAO they have the guys who used to work on it, like Ernesto and I forget the other guy's name. They went and like spun off, they left the Aave Genesis team and they kind of spun off their own boutique development firm. And then they went and asked for like $10 million from the Aave DAO to handle a lot of the smart contract development. So there is like precedent for having multiple teams working on multiple features and those teams being given like funding for this kind of stuff. Not saying I think they're on a different kind of TVL level than we are, so probably 10 million would be a little bit rich, but that would be, for me, like that's one of the big priorities. We want to make sure that the DAO has members that are able to execute on the kind of protocol level features. Anything beyond that, like the marketing side, like if the DAO wants to do marketing for Aavegotchi DAO, I think that's a great idea. We can have Pixelcraft marketing for Aavegotchi. We can have the DAO marketing for Aavegotchi and Aavegotchi DAO. Like those are definitely initiatives that could and probably should be funded by the DAO. But if we talk about like the Maslow hierarchy here, the core level would be, let's make sure that the DAO as a protocol has everything it needs to exist and be decentralized. And then anything else above that's kind of getting into higher parties like marketing, or like if we want to do partnerships with other communities, things like that. So I was just thinking of, what is the pitch you guys are trying to say here? For me, to me, this could be wrong, but this is what I thought you were kind of getting at, is that the DAO development team or the DAO executive committee would kind of be the team that is tasked with executing on some of this more kind of DAO base level stuff, like the contract work, and then there could be levels above that, which relates to marketing. From your summary above, it sounds a little bit more like it's kind of a think tank for helping the DAO understand where it wants to go, which I think is also like, we definitely need to do that work. And then so helping to create a community build roadmap, how to execute it, and then basically being the ones that are issuing the bounties, reviewing the bounties, and all that. So that, especially that last point, I think that's very important. We need people in the DAO that are capable of reviewing the work that's done by others, which currently we really don't have.
I just wanted to jump in and yeah, I hope that it didn't come across like, I really think the think tank idea is actually kind of exactly the opposite of what we're going for. And Dr. Wybe, you can correct me if you disagree, but to me, like, we have a think tank. Like, the DAO is the think tank. What we need the people who can put the pieces together to kind of figure out like what the DAO's asking for, what is the community wanting about this, what is it saying about this, and then helping the DAO realize its vision. It's actually the people doing the day-to-day work that we're lacking. It's why we don't have D-Work up and running today. It's why we currently don't have a good system for giving out bounties, because we don't have the DTF anymore or a replacement for it. It's why we don't have all of these things, not because we lack the ideas or we lack the talent. We just need to put those things all together. And to me, like, that just takes a certain level of like operational decision-making processes that the DAO needs to come to an agreement on to be able to kind of start executing, and we'd be able to execute more efficiently on some of these ideas we have, because I do think we have a great think tank already here in the DAO.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, we look at like what we charged from the Forge team, right? So if we're trying to like build something every quarter, right, then, it was, I guess, 65K plus 8. So around like 70K, right, for a quarter of work. So, the idea is we have this team that's doing, between, 50 and 100K like worth of work, actionable like building, and are also willing to like take on some administrative roles to establish the processes. So I would really want this team to build and execute as much as possible, but also to like maintain. Right, there's going to be a lot of UI work that needs done from the Forge perspective. So when we ship the Forge contracts, like, are we supposed to like keep like maintaining and getting the UI up and running and like get feedback from the community on that user interface process? And as we go to V2 and the community wants certain things to happen from the user interface with V2, who's supposed to do that? Is the DAO supposed to step up and integrate that community feedback to have a better user experience? Or do we just like say, like, Pixelcraft, do something, like, where's V2? Like, I wish V2 had this. And I think our goal is to have people in place that can act and do and build as much as possible, both from the maintenance perspective and from the priorities that the DAO set. Like, if we have our quarterly vote on priorities, this is what we want built, and then this team like could help execute that. And if it's outside of their skill set or bandwidth, then they understand the work that needs to be done to post the bounties to get that done. And if there's multiple things we want to get done, we could have multiple projects running in parallel with multiple community members contributing. And I think that's what success looks like, is we can realize all the things that the DAO wants that's only limited by the talent of our community.
Yeah. I also, as just reading some of the comments here, it seems like some people are saying that the Forge, building out the Forge could possibly be like an ongoing separate bounty aside from this whole proposal. What are you guys' thoughts on that, of, building out Forge features, or is there a different way you're thinking about this? Was there a reason why the Forge got lumped in with this overall structure? Is there a benefit you see to doing that? Or what do you think about this bounty idea of making the Forge work bounty based, even if it is the same members taking it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think we can do, like, with the Forge, we could build what do we think is fun, and pick that out and say, like, man, I'm most excited about a new BRS modifying slot, and I'm not totally sure that that's what the DAO wants, but that's what we're excited to build. So here's how much it costs, and we're going to build it. And I think like that's one strategy. We could just keep coming up with ideas that we think are valuable, and put that in front of the community and then build it. I think there is an advantage to saying, like, what does our community need the most and want built the most, and like, what should we prioritize that from a protocol perspective, and then who can help build it. And I think this team could execute on that, and like what the DAO wants might be a little bit different than what the Forge team thinks is the most fun to build. And I think this would really help utilize and prioritize the talents that we have within the DAO, with the team that can execute, and put them on the tasks that the DAO wants them to be on, instead of kind of independently choosing like what we want to work on and then putting that in front of the DAO.
Yeah. One of the things I'm just thinking about right now, just my, very short experience that I've had as a PM in the DAO, dealing with people approaching me with specific projects or initiatives they may want to do, seeing what gets recognized, seeing what's getting funded so far. I would say we're doing a better job now, but historically, if you look at the start of Aavegotchi to now, it's like we haven't, one of the things that I think the community could do better is recognizing our strongest contributors, our biggest contributors. And, we still have many contributors today that are doing work unpaid, just out of purely let's be honest, right? We're all here because we love Aavegotchi. We love what this has become. And I think, our community has become something special. I've looked around in other crypto communities, and it's really quite shocking to go to a different Discord server these days and see what's going on over there. And so, I think that's one, in my opinion, that's one thing we could do a lot better as a DAO is recognizing our biggest contributors and making sure that they're getting compensated, whether it's through a bounty, whether we're looking at their idea and saying, well, this is a good idea, but you haven't really got it to a place where it can get funded. Let's help you get your idea to a place where the DAO could see value in this and we would actually want to fund this thing. Or, you have a great initiative for this task force, and we think this task force could really add value to the DAO. We're willing to, take this task force under our wing and actually provide some guidance to this task force and maybe even a little funding. And so I think, Dr. Wagme and I, we've had this conversation where I mentioned, I don't think the DAO should ever operate like a top-down corporate structure. That is not why we came here. That's not why we came to crypto. For me, at least, is one of the biggest things was the tenet of decentralization. And, really, I think I kind of lost my train of thought there. But in short, I think this leadership team could operate like a nucleus in a cellular organism. That's kind of how DAOs operate. They don't operate in a top-down structure. It's oftentimes like a cell. You have different organelles in a cell that do different things. But every cell has a nucleus, and this nucleus it guides the cell in its day-to-day activities so it can thrive, right? If I'm gonna use an analogy, I think that would be the one. And so this DAO development team, DDR or DDT, whatever you decide to call it, is a way to have a nucleus in the DAO that's actually able to kind of guide things forward more directly, and provide some leadership to those who are wanting to contribute to the DAO or have been contributing to the DAO and are just not getting recognized for their efforts.
I think a really reasonable way to move forward would be to what does a proposal look like that completely removes any anticipated building work from a Forge or protocol development standpoint. And so it's a little bit different. What does the Forge protocol development look like? So if we develop a path to backgrounds, right, to forging your own background, to creating your own, to designing it, and we work really hard to work with guilds on what does the right process look like to make your own background to have your guild. Is that the Forge protocol, or is that just the Aavegotchi protocol development? I'm not sure that's all Forge specific, but regardless, what does it look like to have a team or the think tank that doesn't do anything? And what does that cost? Is there interest from the community in that, removing all building from a proposal? And then Coderdan, Zico is really concerned about the status of the Forge. If you could comment on, if you think we're close to testnet, and then you have concerns about smart contracts. We're very close.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm writing out a kind of a message here about roles I think we definitely need, and then we probably need. So I'll finish that in a sec. As far as the Forge, we are this week we'll be doing some testing on Tenderly, which is a forked version of Polygon, and the contracts will be deployed on Tenderly. They'll be linked up with the UI that Diddlypoo's been working on, and he's currently doing UI testing. I am also going to be doing a full review on the Forge contracts this week, to make sure that I don't spot anything. We've already had team members from Pixelcraft review the contracts as well and leave comments, and Diddly has updated them based on those comments. So our for Pixelcraft, our target that we would love to have it out by is definitely before mid-February, and it seems to be on track for that.
Just a brief aside on that, like Forge is a really massive undertaking with an incredible amount of work, both like operationally, like from an economic standpoint, like from establishing a DAO process to do it, and then working with Pixelcraft, like working with wearables, like a crazy amount of moving parts. And
yeah,
just,
the wearables are like super intense.
Like
definitely credit to Notorious for going through that process. It's definitely it can be. Like, yeah, the wearables look simple when you look at them, but there's a lot of work that goes, especially like the side views and the hands and all that. It's a ton of work.
Yes, I pretty strongly believe the Forge like really is going to deliver, or the Forge team with the Forge is delivering way more than we were compensated for. So we're so close, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy it. But anyways, is there interest from? What I'm hearing is that we want to separate the Forge team and like specific protocol development initiatives from like a leadership team that helps do all of the DAO side. Is that accurate?
This is so my perspective through this has kind of been, I think it's generally been the same. We really want to make sure that D-Work is successful, and for that you got to have people that are like salaried, making, reviewing the bounties, ensuring that the milestones are being followed, people don't get funded and they just kind of go away. So basically accountability, dashboards. There could be, maybe there's some, I mentioned DAO PM here in my message, and I just wanted to get the message out because we're almost out of time here, but probably something related to like finance lead that you guys are talking about with Mikey. So I'll add in a finance kind of lead, because the finance lead wouldn't necessarily be reviewing bounties, but they would definitely be helping provide that accountability back to like the PM. So we definitely need Solidity lead. Design UI could be the same person as the Solidity, if they also know, if like they're more full stack, they understand front end code, and if there's any UIs or anything that need to be made, we need someone who can either design those or has a good eye. They could outsource to someone doing the bounty. So they got to be able to review. And then basically the leads could also apply for bounties if there's like no one else to do them. But in general, the DAO PM would kind of work with the leads to make sure that they're giving the bounties out to the right people. And then roles we probably need, I think this is where the current proposal is kind of more focusing on, is like the leadership roles, the roadmap, make sure that we're funding things that are actually moving the DAO forward, and then like a finance lead. But that's definitely not, this message is I just wrote it quite hastily here. That covers generally my kind of thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, so basically what the roles we definitely need are the roles that we've proposed, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think so.
Right.
It's just you guys seem to be focusing more on the leadership, I guess. But maybe that's a misconception now. I think, yeah, I have to check the board here again. It's been a busy weekend, so I have looked at this proposal a couple times. Have not like seen all the exact details yet. So product lead, tech lead, finance, yeah, chair.
I just want to chime in too, because when we were working on various iterations of the org chart before, one question, on one iteration there was no chair. It was just kind of like a group of people without a chair, just kind of reporting to the DAO. And then another iteration there was. And so that was something that was bounced around too. But I'll just say this is my own personal feeling, is like, I really don't want to work on a team personally where I feel like I don't have like a clear person that's holding me accountable, or that there's like a clear reporting structure. It's hard to be in a position where you have like many individuals all reporting to the entire DAO, which is why I think it's important also for the DAO to have a single individual who they can hold accountable. So if you have a team like this and you have, and you, it's like, you know, it's like a pixel graph. Like we have Coder Dan. Coder Dan's here on the calls. Like if someone's mad about something Pixel Craft's doing, like we know we can go yell at Coder Dan. You know, there's someone there. Whereas if you just have a team of people, you know, the DAO has to sort out like, well, who was supposed to do that and who was supposed to do that. So it's the old like one throat to choke thing for the DAO, and for the people on the team, it's like giving them a clear sense of who they're reporting to, and also that person being able to hold them accountable to make sure that their work is up to what they promised. So that was also the reasoning there, from my perspective.
I mean, that totally makes sense. Yeah, it's definitely useful to have that person that kind of leads the ship in a way.
I think a good example is the Forge, right? So like it was really important to have one person that knew exactly what was going on with every single person working on the Forge team, because there's really complex economics. Like Diddley was doing both smart contract and UI work, like working with Zbot and working with Notorious on like all of the hurdles we had to overcome from that perspective. And then understanding like, all the little problems that come up, because there's like a ton, and like all the huge decisions that we have to make, and like really make sure we get the right things in front of the DAO is an extraordinary amount of work. So the idea that like we don't have someone to like hold people accountable, and we don't have someone that knows like what's going on with every single person and the hurdles that they face to make them be more like efficient and supported, like is crazy. Like I don't think I could have, like for the Forge team, I think we could have done a better job of like maybe having a couple technical people on, so Diddley didn't just get swamped, and he's been doing like 40 hours per week, like the last couple weeks, like way undercompensated for the amount of work he's done. And so I didn't do a good job of like estimating that. And so like that falls on me to like get him more funding to develop what he needs to do, and then put that, 8,000 requests in front of the DAO to develop geodes. It's like I really think we need that sort of leadership to understand the problems that come up, to understand like what the DAO needs and how the DAO process works, and then to help troubleshoot that, or else we're gonna like not get shit done. And like I don't know. I guess I hope the DAO thinks that I work hard to get things done, and that's what I would be bringing to the role.
Real quick question, because there was some discussion on this. These roles would, whatever the compensation ends up being, is it fixed in a Ghost? Is it like, are these denominated in Ghost, or are they denominated in Ghost, denominated in USD?
Denominated in Ghost. I think feedback here is useful too, right? We're like pioneering this together. Like, what does compensation look like? We've generally done all payments so far from a bounty process or from the DPM standpoint in Ghost. I think that there's probably some volatility coming up with Ghost. It's down like 50% in the last year. But speaking with every single person in the proposed role, they were willing to accept Ghost as the denomination of payment. But I think it could be reasonable to consider capping upside, right? If Ghost goes up X amount, like we don't pay more than that. If Ghost goes down this much, then we like prompt consideration for different remuneration strategy.
Yeah, I think some sort of limitation on the downside and upside probably would make sense. Because yeah, if the curve does turn off in like the next 6 months, it could get volatile. Much more volatile than it is right now.
Also, we don't have that much DAI, right? So I think like asking for a quarter of all our DAI didn't feel really good, right? Versus our Ghost, and all of our strategies to bring value to the protocol, to increase revenue, are Ghost denominated. And so I estimate that like the Forge is gonna put Ghost in the bank, right? And so it kind of made sense to consider our payments with the value we're adding and the revenue streams to be the denomination of our payment.
Yeah, generally, like people are saying here, the cleanest way is, even though we hate dirty USD, it's cleaner just to say it's a fixed USD amount of Ghost, like 75K, whatever it is that month. If it's however much that comes out to be per month, you would just calculate it at the month of, calculate the price at the day when you're, could be like the 14-day moving average or however you want to do it. But that generally makes it a little bit easier to value, rather than having like a capped upside or downside. Just say today the Ghost is 150, so therefore that equates to this much USD.
And could you talk, like, so for the Forge, if we would say, like, we want the Forge, like, Pixelcraft build it for us, like, could you guys have done that? And would you have done it for $63,000?
Who's that? I mean, we didn't even think of the Forge until you guys came up with it, and it just would it definitely would have like been a very large undertaking for us to do that. But we're trying to encourage like other community members to get involved.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think the Forge is one example, but if you go case by case, there's going to be ones where Pixelcraft is not equipped or doesn't have the bandwidth, and something passes. It just doesn't make much sense. The whole point of the DAO is, as we mature, to hand off more responsibility to the DAO. That's the way it should go. So Pixelcraft will keep doing what we do, but I'd rather see more dev studios, more developers working through whatever system you guys develop, whether it's through D-Work and a leadership team or whatever it may be. But there's really no reason that Pixelcraft should have to take on each and every proposal that passes.
Yeah, I agree, and this is our answer to that problem. And I think the wonderful thing about a DAO is we can have other proposals too, right? This discussion has been going on for months, and I think we all really want to move the DAO forward. And if there's alternate proposals, like, that's okay, and like feedback's okay. But this is a potential path forward that I think would be successful.
Yeah, just for what I was saying in the text channel, I think you guys are on the right track here. It's just the devil in the details and defining the scope, and maybe the Forge is something that it's kind of like, I think you guys are just recognizing the Forge team basically overlaps with this team 1-to-1 pretty much, except for Hefe. So like, why repeat? But it's totally okay if you guys also have your own projects that have funding and budgets allocated to it, and it just so happens it's the same people that are on this. Like, I don't think there's a conflict of interest or anything like that. So as long as it's structured properly, probably makes sense to just separate the two and have a very clearly defined scope here on what exactly we're trying to do. And it seems like your main, if you could say, like, in a sentence, what is the main goal here is to bring more development to the DAO, right? Like, you want to get funds into the hands of creators. I heard you say something to that effect, and that part I totally resonate with. Like, that really should, if you distill it down to the core here, we do need that.
For sure, and we need people to understand like what that work looks like, and to make that onboarding process really easier. Like, all of our mission and vision statements, like, really always kept coming back to, like, let's have something we can build on together. But I think we need structure in place to, like, clearly make that work available, to understand, like, what that process looks like to apply and get funding and build.
I just took a few notes down here based on our conversation so far here. And so, some of the big points here made during the meeting, just looking back, Forge team and leadership roles could be separated. It seems like that makes sense. Allowing others equally qualified to submit their bids and provide input. So I think, Dr. Wagner, you've kicked off that official thread. So please, like, if you do have any relevant feedback, or if you do have some personal qualifications, or you're even interested in something like this, we definitely want to get as much input as possible in these roles. And this was a starting point to work from. Next thing here was necessary positions. So we just look at all the positions there and maybe define specific scope, and the more granular details. Using leads as a means of recognizing and funding hardworking community members. So, I think we mentioned during this meeting here that these leads are not going to be solely taking on this work as a centralized entity. This is a means of having some leadership, guided development that can bring guided development to the DAO. And so that means empowering a lot of our community builders and actually getting them funded and getting a plan in front of them for them to execute on. That was another thing. And then lastly here, just what Jesse said, in short, we're trying to bring guided development to the DAO. So let me know if I missed anything there, but I think those are some of the big points that I heard from the community, or, just from our chat here today during the call. Was there anything that I might have missed that were some pretty significant points that were made? I think I covered it. Yeah, this is a first discussion here, and I think I appreciate the just the community feedback here, and just the general civility around this conversation, because it is it's a lot to take in here, and I think we'll iterate on this. Does anybody up here have anything else to add regarding the DDT? Yeah, I agree. I agree with a lot of the comments there. Jesse saying this proposal has solid people, just needs more clarity on what is within scope and what is not. Specific examples, for sure. Okay. So yeah, we actually spent our the majority of our time here discussing this, and that's okay. We knew this was going to be a big discussion, so it was all right to spend this meeting here discussing this. Is there I don't know, Coder Den, are you kind of done for today? Do you have some time to? The other topic we have to discuss here is another big topic, so I don't know if we have time for two big topics here today. We are ready to drop the curve discussion.
I'm still good for a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I just quickly put a slide together this morning. The bonding curve is not forever. This is our conversation we've been having. Moon kicked it off a couple months ago, and more than a couple months ago. This was in August. He brought up some concerns that he had seen with the bonding curve, and so I just wanted to kind of catch people up on what this conversation was about, what the concerns are, and like let's get some discussion going around this. Oh, I see, and yeah, I see.
We're gonna get Golden Cross here.
Absolutely.
He's gonna walk us through this.
Oh, look at this! Perfect, awesome.
Yeah. I mean, in the interest of time, because I know everybody's over, I think everybody here is the most keyed into the situation facing the bonding curve. So, I mean, if anyone wants to do a full review, they can read this. But I'll skip the first half, which covers a lot of, I think, what you're about to go through with the background and moons and basically de-risking from MakerDAO, right? Like the fact that the curve is amazing, but it's when we start to look at it, we realize, oh, we're built on top of the MakerDAO and DAI token, and that makes me uncomfortable. I mean, even just personally, Dan and I's first project with BullionX took a big hit when we did something similar. We built that project on top of one of the first DAOs ever, Digix DAO, and that Digix DAO issued a gold stablecoin. Well, guess what? The gold stablecoin drugged us. So that was terrible because we had these, the first of their kind NFTs that were NFTs wrapped around stablecoins, gold stablecoins. And so now the value of BullionX are entirely historic and kind of a precursor to Aavegotchis. They are the collaborative artists that we worked with throughout that to create those. So bit of a forewarning story. It's close to home. And so when I start seeing rumblings with DAI, I pay attention. And so, yeah, that backdrop is covered in the proposal Dan just linked. If we're all caught up on that, like I think we are, and in the interest of time, we'll go straight to the maturation of Aavegotchi DAO and the proposal. So I basically make the argument here that after 2.5 years, despite everything we just talked about and the challenges that remain for the DAO to kind of open its wings and have some more responsibilities and more executive abilities, despite all that, we have made a ton of progress. We should give ourselves credit. We've got a core here on this call tonight that is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of people with credibility and reputation within our ecosystem. We've accomplished a lot of amazing things like moving Ghost from Ethereum to Polygon. That was kind of the first one, kind of the first separation from the curve, you could say. Over 50 improvement proposals and the recent foundation forming. So, that kind of sets the stage. And given the risks and the idea that it's unacceptable for us to, even if you think it's a minimal amount of risk posed by DAI, you have to look at this and decide, well, is even a minimum amount of risk acceptable when it's totally avoidable? Because we do have a DAO that can handle itself now. And so that wasn't the case when we launched, obviously. Everybody was strangers and everything was new. But we're at a different place now, and so we're able to make this proposal for us to close the Ghost bonding curve in a controlled, methodical way, following a few simple steps. First, we would pass an AGIP, as I say. Do you guys say AGIP? A Aavegotchi improvement proposal on Snapshot, confirming Aavegotchi's DAO's intentions and setting the terms. Second, once the core prop passes, we would have to, this is interesting, we would have to migrate a required 8% of all Ghost supply back to Ethereum so we can reach quorum on Aragon, where our Curves on-chain voting system is harbored. So actually, I had a call with Aragon last week. They wanted to reach out and do a profile on us. And I was like, oh, guys, your guys' timing is amazing. So we'll see what happens there. They're actually excited about this. They think it's pretty exciting if something happens here. 3, we would have to complete the Aragon-based vote, and it's at this point the curve would immediately close, and any DAI collateral would be transferred to all multi-sig wallets in accordance with the whatever's defined in the core prop. And real quick, we've run some simulations on this. We actually put one of our Solidity leads on this for about a week to flesh out and look for poke holes in it and make sure everything would run fine if we were to do this with Aragon. Coder Dan, do you have any specific details on that you want to share other than, yeah, we figured it out, we need the 8%?
Yeah, as far as like turning it off, the first step is to basically delist DAI as a collateral. There is a little bit of a thing that we'll need to pay attention to there, which is anyone who has an open order that has been filled but has not been claimed would need to do that order before DAI is delisted as a collateral. So we'll have to make very clear that that's the only kind of tricky part of the entire process. But once it's delisted, then we do one more vote to essentially allow the DAI to be transferred from the bonding curve, the contract via the agent, or the Aragon agent. And then once that vote goes through, the DAI can then be transferred, and then it can be split between whatever kind of wallets is decided upon in the final SIG prop, core prop.
Yeah, absolutely. And so once all that's completed, then step 4, the curve is dead. Long live the Ghost. And all of this comes with an asterisk. The Aavegotchi DAO Foundation, which is yet to be fully formed, and the subsequent multi-sig have to be set up before step 3 could ever happen. So we could proceed with the SIG prop, core prop, but nothing happens if that foundation isn't formed. That's for sure. So I see questions about, very deep questions about, is Ghost not owned by the DAO? And I think we can get into that here, and you kind of see, like, the DAO is born from the curve, right? And so Ghost Token literally controls on-chain voting on the curve. That's why it's able to be shut down only by that method. There's a bit of a hierarchy. There's special AGT tokens from the summoners to kickstart this, but even we could not, as summoners, go in and turn it off on our own. It's not possible. So it requires Ghost token holders to come together and want to do this, and there's no other way around it. So that comes to the DAI and what to do with that, and we think turning off the curve is an opportunity to secure significant funding for our ecosystem while dramatically simplifying the Ghost tokenomics, which we can argue about till we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, the main reason here we're doing this is we have to de-risk, and if you don't, then you have to just live and die by MakerDAO, actually. So far, the DAI in the curves contracts has only served one purpose. It's not really about ownership, it's about what it can do, and all it does is provide liquidity for the creation and destruction of Ghost tokens, the minting and burn function. And after the curve's closure, whatever DAI remains in that contract will be freed to go work on behalf of the Aavegotchi protocol. So one way to think about it is that DAI has been incredibly inefficient up to this point. And another point here that is worth mentioning is anyone who, let's say this passes the core prop, obviously that can be bullish or bearish for whoever's viewing it, and the curve is still open. So people can trade in and out of the curve if they don't want to be a part of this, obviously. So I think that it's very fair, very transparent. And there are basically only 3 distinct wallets that make sense to manage a portion of this DAI, at least initially. And we'll get to where it could trickle out to from there. But first would be the Aavegotchi DAO Liquidity Provisions wallet. This is really important. And that is, right now the curve is the ultimate source for deep liquidity for Ghost. And you see this all the time, major sales in and out. And if the curve goes away, then what do we have? We have, decent liquidity with a USDC pair on QuickSwap. We're listed on the major exchanges, but they don't have like super deep liquidity by any means, especially compared to the curve. And so we have to address that. And so we could allocate together 20% of collateral to the DAO, and the DAO would have to come up with basically this would be a team, a multi-sig managed by whoever the DAO elects, just to handle this particular allocation of funds. And there needs to be one or more places for people to enter in and exit Ghost with healthy liquidity. So we could, as a DAO, decide to put it on a major exchange, or we could say, you know what, there's a lot of FUD on that. Let's keep it decentralized. Let's partner with QuickSwap or Uniswap, or a mixture of the two. And so this is something that the DAO could have a lot of say in deciding where we want to put our deepest liquidity at initially. And on a note on that, Pixelcraft can definitely help to introduce this team or the wider foundation to trusted market makers or decision makers. We have contacts at Binance, Coinbase, Kraken, or Uniswap or QuickSwap. So, any of the above or others, if you want introductions, and we're not handling it, and the DAO is, this is a pretty cool, very focused scope team that would be working on this. All right, then another 40% would split to Aavegotchi DAO Foundation as just like pure treasury, whatever you guys want to do with it in terms of long-term holdings, putting it initially into probably the foundation's 9-person elected multi-sig. That seems to be the obvious choice, but based on the conversation here, there may be other leadership teams or other wallets that should be holding or taking care of some of these funds. So that would, again, be up to the DAO to kind of figure out how to diversify here. But I don't think it has to all be, in one multi-sig forever all the time, but probably initially. At least that's the proposal here. And then the last part would be another 40% with Pixelcraft, kind of the home of the summoners, and probably the most likely to just have the most experience dealing with multi-sigs and handling funds and being able to put it to work. We talk about efficiency. We can think of about 10 things we'd love to do, that we just do not have the budget to do right now. So we've always been quite conservative, for example, with our marketing budget, preferring less sale and more ship. But with all the product launches we want to do this year and the way we feel like sometimes we're not as aggressive with the marketing as we would like to be, it costs a lot of money. And so no doubt we could put the money to work if it comes into Pixelcraft. So besides increasing our marketing spending, we'd also be able to double down on pursuing the best talent we can find in what we have discovered to be a very competitive hiring environment. There's definitely no way around that. So that's kind of the idea there. And there is also, I guess, worth mentioning this kind of wild idea of a crypto apocalypse scenario. I guess I would be kind of a subscriber to this. If you are reading a lot of the FUD on Twitter, I don't think it's just FUD. There's new bad news every day for some of these centralized exchanges. We've already seen so many dominoes fall. And there is a worst case scenario lurking out there where, I mean, it gets really, really bad. And we would like to see Aavegotchi survive that or even thrive. I like to think about Aavegotchi as the IP being potentially so strong where we outgrow Web3. Like, we're born in Web3, we dominate Web3, we do great, but we can also be in Hollywood, we can also be in literature, we can also be in pop culture and fashion. And so in terms of de-risking and risk management, diversification, I think for both Pixelcraft and I would argue even for the DAO, there could be a consideration where a certain percent, probably not too significant, but a certain percent would make sense to move off chain just to keep the lights on in a worst case scenario if all the stable coins crash or whatever, worst case scenario does actually play out. Okay, so that's kind of the proposal. The timeline is, let's make February the Ghost Independence Month, and we would immediately begin the task of removing the reliance on the curve with a relatively straightforward process, the same one we described above. We just put this out. This will stay up for a full week of discussion. And based on the feedback there, if it makes sense to, we'll proceed with a SIG prop. And as usual, Pixelcraft will refrain from voting in any of the snapshot votes. So that will be out there as a SIG prop, basically end of the first week of February. That would turn into a core prop. And basically by the end of the second week, by the middle of February, if that core prop passes, then we could begin the heavy lift of rallying everyone to move at least 8% of Ghost back to Ethereum for the on-chain Aragon vote. And because the core prop would have passed Pixelcraft at this point, if we wanted, I think it would make sense we could contribute some of our Ghost to bridging back because the core prop had already passed. If the core prop doesn't pass, none of this matters. And then week 4, after that happens, basically the Aragon vote will pass, the closing of the curve happens, and Pixelcraft Studio has already invested our Solidity team's resources into, I'm reading here, it talks about the simulating of the process, but we already talked about that. So yeah, the 20% liquidity provision would need to be the most time sensitive to go out and be managed swiftly, because the time between new liquidity finding a new home and the curve closing would be the most volatile time for Ghost. And so that would have to be, that team would have to be coordinating and be ready at a moment's notice. The rest of this proposal kind of dives into what a Ghost token after the closing of the curve looks like and what it could mean. So we can get into that, but I encourage everybody to read it thoroughly. It does cite Moon's discussion from before and some of the positives and how, real quick, I'll run through. We have the SuperNet blockchain coming, so Ghost is gaining utility by becoming a gas token. I feel like that's the best case scenario here. We're closing the curve and opening the chain. And it's a great time to basically invite new stakeholders into the Aavegotchi DAO ecosystem. These could be validators or other large players that want to have a stake in this chain, and they get governance with it. So we could basically use this as an opportunity to grow the pie and grow Aavegotchi as a brand and what we could metaphorically call Ghost 2.0. It is the same Ghost on the same contract, though, to be clear. And then, Ghost has always had this dual mandate as an eco-governance token. So I addressed that here a bit in that maybe it'd be more governance but less economy. And that's where Moon kind of talked about how Ghost has in the past actually been a bit of a friction for people to get into the other Aavegotchi assets. And so there's a case to be made that maybe as people are building on the chain especially, it would also be very hard to enforce that everything on the chain be done in, and treating Ghost as a currency. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. So maybe stablecoins to buy Aavegotchi assets becomes a thing. Maybe other tokens can have a seat at the table, including our own Alchemica. So that's something that is addressed here. It also points out that, one limitation that has been a little tough for Pixelcraft is our operating costs. Even though we had very large years in some of this previous sales, we also diamond-handed our Ghost and yet didn't participate in governance. So if you think about it, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And yet it kind of undermined our abilities in certain cases to spend like we wanted to, invest in certain areas of our team. So TLDR, basically governance token, yes, stronger than ever. Ecosystem token would likely be reduced if the curve is turned off. Cryptocurrency would be limited, but case by case. I think it's optional. Gas token soon with the Gotchi chain launch, of course. And of course, it could be a game token. It certainly can be a great incentive, such as the recent Gotchi board competition has shown. So that is pretty much it. There's a summary here at the end talking about the maturation of Aavegotchi DAO and why we think this is the right time to shut down the curve, our beautiful, lovely curve. So want everybody to jump in here. Thank you for consideration and feedback. And this will, like I say, be live for at least a week of in-depth conversation. And it's a very important decision, not to be made lightly, but after a lot of time spent on this, I know I've personally come to the conclusion that there's just no reason to risk Aavegotchi being built on top of a layer that really isn't that solid. And I'm referring to MakerDAO there. Sorry, MakerDAO, we love you if they hear this. Okay, so I had no chance to look at the text channel while I was going through that. Does anybody want to hop on the mic and share feedback or questions or let me know what some of the hotter feedback live was?
I think question for you guys. Can you talk a little bit about the request for 40% of the DAI or 8 million upfront? I think as the DAO is considering what to do with this DAI, it's helpful to understand like whatever project we fund, like what their runway is, like what their expenses is, like what is going to happen with that 8 million, and kind of how you guys arrived at that 40% number. And then just some context, there's been some discussion over the last couple of weeks in the Treasury channel kind of discussing this. That's helpful to read through just to get a broad feedback from the community on where their heads were at.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a couple angles here you could go by, but the most simple and direct one would be there's the if not Pixel, like these DAI have to go somewhere, and so if we don't manage them, we can't spend them all at once, right? We could talk about burns and runways, and we do. We see so much left on the table that we can increase, triple, quadruple certain budgets. That's like already there, but you're still not going to spend all that in a year or two, right? And I think that's okay. I think it comes down to all the summoners are at Pixelcraft Studios, and if we don't manage them, then who is going to? And so we have this new foundation. It's very, very green. And subsequent, absent of that, there's not many multi-sigs out there that I think of it as myself as a whale for Ghost. Where would I be comfortable seeing all this DAI go when the curve closes? And I think it's obvious, like Pixelcraft would be the most time proven to hold a significant portion of these. And then in the name of decentralization, obviously others should also be managing this. And so, basically there's a 50-50, keep it simple type of thought about it. And then then there's the kicker of, well, we have to earmark a significant portion for liquidity provisions. So just took 10 from each side, basically.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one of our major sources of revenue that help offset the burn is the 150K every month from the curve. And so once the curve is turned off, we're not going to have that source of DAI anymore for the company, which we do use that every month now to pay salaries for team members.
Yeah, to be clear, it's not enough, but it certainly is significant.
We also, to give a sense of our burn rate, it varies based on various things that are happening that month, but currently it's around 300 to 500K per month. 500K would be if we have like some audits or some, there might be some marketing things that we want to do that month. But yeah, it's generally in the 250, 300 to 500K range. Why is our burn rate so high? We have a team of 30, 35 team members right now. Quite a few, half of the team are just developers. It's actually a very modest burn rate compared to many other teams in the space. We're quite frugal with our money. We try to be. But
the expertise you think about. Sorry, just you think about the Gotchiverse and what we've achieved there and what it took to achieve that. It's not very apparent because it's a super retro, simple-looking game on the surface. But the back end built from scratch, you could argue it was a bad decision or it was too cost prohibitive. But it is not easy, and it requires a certain level of expertise, and that requires a certain payroll and a certain level of talent. If you're on the inside looking, it's pretty conservative, and there's hires left to be desired. We're kind of redlining with the team. It would be fair to say. So, we don't have a lot of wiggle room to increase our burn rate, even though we know we're going to anyway, regardless of the curve, to get where we need to go. But it's like I say, we're kind of running hot, and
just one example, the new CMO that we really, really want. We've been wanting to bring on a super experienced CMO to run the marketing, but CMOs also, they kind of expect to have other marketing team members working with them, which we do have, but it's not enough. We always feel like we need to do more marketing, but at the same time, marketing, if you do it properly in this space, you have to, there's earned media that you need to spend on. There's influencer marketing, which is one of the most effective ways to do marketing in this space if done right. And we look at that, we're like, well, we can do that marketing, or should we spend it on developers instead? So having to make that choice fairly frequently can be, it does kind of make it difficult for us to get out there more than we'd like.
Yeah. And to address Immaterial's question here, he said, we've always been told PC has a huge war chest for marketing sitting there. Is that not the case? Well, I mean, I don't know who was always telling that, but we definitely are. We have a lot of ghost, but like I say, we like to diamond hand the ghost.
Yeah.
And
we didn't. We honestly, we probably should have not diamond handed that when it was 280, but we have always wanted to diamond hand ghost because we really believe in it as a token, and we believe in the ecosystem. And I'll be frank, we did get taxed on those ghost holdings as well. So, but now it's $1. We still have a lot of ghost, and that is still a great treasury that we can pull from if need be.
Yeah, I guess the main question is whether PC holding these, spending them right, because Jesse was saying that it makes sense for PC to hold them as being experienced multi-siggers, etc. But it sounds like it's more like to spend it, right? To spend it on marketing, to spend it on development. So if that was the case, I'd expect it to be more kind of deliverable driven and based on timescales to be like, we want to spend this much to achieve this.
Yeah, sure. I think it's both. If you read through the proposal, it definitely emphasizes that we want to we want to put this to work, right? Like, no doubt. I was just addressing the other half of the question, which is where can we safely put it? So I think both can be true at the same time.
And yeah, I mean, we are open to some sort of milestone-based approach, but who's going to make the milestones? Do we make the milestones? Who signs off on those? We have a ton of questions in the DAO currently about just setting milestones for the DAO.
Well, I think it's also fair to say, push back a bit in that Pixelcraft is more than, like, in my opinion, we've delivered on our roadmaps. We just issued a new roadmap because most of the previous was completed. So there's proof in the pudding, and then there's the alternative. You always have to go with what's the next best alternative. And as we just spent an hour on, I mean, WAGMI and the team here with the Forge is working very hard to establish a team that can execute and move the ball with the DAO. And I hope that happens. We need 10 pixel crafts, to be honest. But in the meantime, this is a pretty good structure. There's really, it's you know, got to go somewhere. And if you guys ultimately feel that the DAI would be better used by not going to Pixelcraft, then we can also talk about that. That's totally fine. But we put our best foot forward. We think let's get to business, and let's keep everybody funded. There's more than enough here to give runway for, you know, really, because you have to remember, like, we are competing with things like what Dan just mentioned with Aave. You know, they're DeFi. They're not competing directly with us, but the size of crypto and like the top 100 market cap, if that's where we're going, like, their burn rates are a lot bigger than ours. We've done a lot with a little, and it's a shame because we have the expertise. We feel like, I think that, you know, we can execute better than a lot, but yeah, the marketing budgets alone just demand a lot more. Yeah, I think we have an opportunity here to do something really special, but we got to put the DAI to work.
Marketing is just one aspect. It's also, like you mentioned, the dev market, the Web3 dev market is very, very competitive. If you want to get the best devs, the best designers, and we now say we don't need the best in the world, but we want quality people on the team, because not hiring quality people for a team is probably one of the worst mistakes you can make. It's almost like just wasting money. So we want to make sure that we're bringing on quality individuals. And in this, even in the downturn of the whole worldwide tech downturn, like, it's the salaries for Web3, for crypto, Solidity, UI are still very competitive.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's saying we don't want the money to go to Pixelcraft, but I think the DAO, if they're voting for that amount to go to Pixelcraft, it would be nice to see, like, exactly that's for. You know, just because I know obviously you guys aren't going to do it, but, you know, we don't actually know where that 8 million DAI is gonna go, right? It could just be, you know, paying out some Pixelcraft bonuses. Like, not saying that is going to happen, but it's just, that's the problem with it going into a centralized entity with no kind of like transparency of exactly where it's going to be spent on. But I don't think anyone is saying we don't want Pixelcraft to get that money. I think we'd just like to have some, you know, deliverables and timescales of exactly what it's being spent on and what the difference would be with and without that money, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And so we can take more time to document and answer those questions through the week. In that chat, we can provide some sources and some projections and some estimates. The there's definitely no issue there. I think we're kind of anticipating that. So that's totally fine. And I guess just the other thing to emphasize here, and that we do mention in the proposal, is that we specifically mention ahead of time that some of this we do intend to take off chain for the apocalypse provision. And you're right, that part would be more opaque. But on the big scale of things, we don't know where the curve will close, right? How much DAI will be in the curve. So it might be 8 million, it might be less, it might be more if people are bullish on this, and we'll just have to see. But I think whatever that number is, we're talking less than 10%. And I think that's more than adequate to get through the storm, kind of thing. So that means 90% or more is still on chain, for what that's worth. So I know we're way over time, but yeah, we published it. We welcome everybody take these thoughts. I like the immediate feedback. We can move on some of this, and definitely carry the conversation throughout the coming days and at the link.
Yep, let me post that again.
Aavegotchi Guardians Alpha gameplay. Well, we're working on it. We're working hard. Yeah, drop the link again.
There you go. Nice.
Yep, and if you guys want to play with the numbers, if you think something else makes more sense, I mean, now's the time. But the bigger picture here is the risk and de-risking. I'm of the mind that if something's going to go wrong with DAI, it's going to be in the first half of the year more than the second half. Like the storm is kind of right at our doorstep. So what happens with regulations and kind of these stablecoin wars and these exchange wars that's ongoing, that's all playing out right now as we speak. So we're actually really fortunate that, it was Terra, not MakerDAO, that kind of thing. And so I just wouldn't be able to look back at this if we just sat on our hands and did nothing, and then watch DAI go like depeg one day. Because once that happens, there's no going back. So that's the bigger picture. We'll figure out the DAI stuff. I'm not too worried about it. But I think we do want to move fairly fast on this if we end up all in agreement that the bonding curve is more risk than it's worth at this point.
The GUSD thing it's not a big issue in terms of their overall the amount of their portfolio that GUSD has. I'm just worried that if GUSD does depeg or go to zero, it's going to cause some sort of like bank run on MakerDAO. Could be kind of conspiracy theory or a very low chance, but even if there's like a $500 million hole in MakerDAO's bank sheet, doesn't look good, and it might spook people. That's what we're really worried about, just the contagion that could flow from that, and people start removing their funds from MakerDAO, and it starts becoming kind of decollateralized. So
one bad tweet from Gary Gensler.
That's all it takes.
Or you wake up one day and like they've like blacklisted, USDC has blacklisted DAI or something, some ridiculous thing like that. These are all risk factors that we're taking into consideration.
Yeah, there's a lot of flags, and so just to be, I think it's the kind of adult thing to do is to have this conversation. Just it's like, dang, because I love the curve more than anybody. And when Moon first made the proposal, I was like, man, are you sure, dude? But it's really, I think we address that, and then it might even make sense to break this into 2 sig props, right? Should it be turned off, and if it is, do we want to do the split as proposed here, or we see what comes out, another option or 2, and let ghost holders decide.
2 sig props definitely makes sense. If there's any, we don't want the first proposal, whether it should be turned off or not, to fail because there's disagreement on the split. So it might make sense to make those into 2.
Will the DAO Foundation wallet be completely set up and that structure completely in place by next month?
Well, all of this is predicated on that happening, and so yeah, we're trying to move as quickly as we can with that. if there was someone earlier was asking about Ross, he was retained by Pixelcraft. He's been a little hard to get a hold of recently. We're trying to figure out what's going on with him, but he should be back this week. And if he's not, we'll probably have to reach out to other members of either LexDAO or just reach out to some Cayman company setup agencies. Yeah, we can all do a wellness check on Ross.
Yeah, seriously, I'm in his DMs. We're gonna get that time with him, get this through the hoop. So I can't imagine 3 weeks from now that hasn't happened. Like when Monday hits, Ross's phone is blowing up again. So it should be fine. I know he's had his hands full and a little bit of travel.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question about the timing of the prop?
Sure.
So if we're kind of doing this in February, we'll be driving the demand for Ghost once the curve is off, because traditionally a lot of the demand has come from staking for friends to enter in raffles or for sales, and obviously we're not doing either of those things. So if we turn off the curve next month and the supernet isn't coming until the summer, what's going to drive the demand for Ghost in that time and stop it just going to zero basically?
Now, so this is tricky because we're not to talk about price, and we have no comments on price and speculation. But I think it is safe to say the obvious that so many tokens and so much value in the wider crypto space, it's not all from utility, right? Most of it comes from speculation. And for better or worse, we've risen above that and had the benefits of the curve kind of reduce volatility and keep that. If you looked at a pie chart of why people are interested in Ghost, it would look very different than your average, cryptocurrency. And the slice for speculation would be far, far smaller. That's going to change for better or worse. And I think, you could think about that as part of the answer. And what that does is it creates an opportunity to bring in new stakeholders. And so one thing I can say for sure is, regardless of what happens with the DAI, at Pixelcraft, we're very aware that we have to allocate a significant amount of time and effort on our team, and even we're hiring out new leads and partnerships and BD and all of those kind of things to help communicate to guilds, to other DAOs, to other potential validators, and basically go in outreach overdrive and let them know the story and what's happening with the Ghost bonding curve and why they should know about it and why they should care, and why it might be the right time for them to reconsider Ghost token, and tell them about this roadmap and where we're going and what we've already accomplished. So that's where, regardless of what happens with the DAI, our marketing budget is and our outreach budgets are reallocating in that direction real heavy here, because we do feel, whether or not we're responsible for the curve, we do feel like there's no doubt that we have the most influence and impact on what we ship at Pixelcraft has an impact on what happens, going forward with interest in Ghost, for better or worse, at least in the short term. And so we'll take that responsibility and be going as hard as we can to get the story out and get new partners onboarded, if that makes sense. Real quick, I see Gadfly asking about Ross and who he represents. It's not that he doesn't represent the DAO. I think this is another example of where Pixelcraft often comes in and we do things on behalf of Aavegotchi, whether you want to say that's the DAO or not. But in lack of that kind of executable level leadership team that the Forge team is working on proposing, something like that, we do often fill in and pay for things that cost money off chain, or engage in contracts with people like Ross. So we did that, but I'm not quite sure what Gadley is worried about there. We're definitely doing it to help get things started. And by all means, once the foundation is set up, open a bank account, and maybe the Aavegotchi DAO can contract and pay directly for some of these off-chain services. Okay, reading here. Hefe, are we spoiling the party? Are we way over time here, or?
Yeah, I think I think we've addressed a lot of the major questions in the conversation here. There are, of course, some finer details that we can, discuss. And I like your idea of having the two different proposals. It makes a lot of sense. I don't see any burning questions for right now. I think we covered a lot in this call, and a lot of meat in this DAO discussion between our two big topics we discussed here today. Is there anything else from anybody up here that you guys would like to add before we close out here for the morning?
Oh, from our side, I think we're good. We covered everything, and take a look, guys. See what makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely. One last time, I'm just gonna post the discussion Jesse here put up, as well as the discussion from Moon. If I think, like you said, everybody in here is caught up for the most part, but if you do need to catch up, we'll also put together a little Miro board of just the details from the bonding curve before, so you can get access to that information pretty easily there. So those are the two threads there regarding the bonding curve. I don't think we have anything else for today to cover. We can talk about the mission and vision. I feel like it'd be more relevant to discuss for next week's meeting. I appreciate everybody that came out here today for our Sunday DAO call. 63 people in attendance right now. It's awesome. Good to see that sort of engagement on a early Sunday morning. And yeah.
Hey, Hefe, I don't mean to jump in, but I just want to ask a quick question regarding the Denver SIG prop going to core prop. Do we know if that's going to happen this week, or is it going to be delayed another week?
So the core prop, it's ready for a core prop. We're not making any. I just have to make actually one edit to my fuel cost, because I was using liters instead of gallons. And so that's the only modification I need to make to the proposal, but I'll get that over to you guys at Pixelcraft. And, whichever day you guys normally submit your core proposals, we can get that up.
Do we know if it will happen this week, or will it be delayed a week? Because I know there's a timing, so I just want to figure that out, because it's kind of very essential to the whole.
Yeah, it's time sensitive in that regard. Coder Dan, do you think this is something we could get up at some point during this week? Earlier would be better, but I can
Which
get
one is
you
that?
That's the Eat Denver Gotchi Lodge 2023 funding proposal.
Yeah, we'll do another round of core props probably Tuesday or Wednesday, if that works for you guys.
All right. Yeah, excellent. I'll get that over to you. I'll get the edited copy over to you.
Okay,
we'll
perfect.
Yeah. Excellent.
All right, thanks, everyone. Have a lovely Sunday.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.